All right, back with you. Another RTD Q&A. Excited to have a returning guest, Mr. Max Keiser from the Keiser Report, joining us today, and I want to cover a variety of subject matter, and also get a chance to have you guys, throw out some questions or whatnot, and we'll touch as much as we can in a timely manner. So, Max Keiser, welcome back to RTD.
It's so awesome to be back. This is my favorite show.
I appreciate you.
My favorite host. It's my favorite time of year. And I'm loving lockdown.
Loving lockdown. All right, I see you got your HODL shirt on. So I want to touch on a variety of subject matter. So
HODL.
We're in in Michigan, we're no longer on official lockdown, but the Great Lockdown is what this current time frame has been called. And I remember when we met last year, we were talking about the issues that we were having well before now. So are you surprised at any of the events that have transpired to this point and the lockdown being used as the excuse for the crumbling of our monetary system?
Well, the coronavirus epidemic is a surprise, and it's not something I've experienced in my lifetime. The last major global kind of virus attack like this was 1918. But America is not a resilient country. American economy is not a robust economy. It's over-indebted. And so something like this comes along and it exposes the economy as extremely fragile. And the government, so far, their only response has been to print more money. They're not printing money to make masks, and masks have been proven to be effective against the virus. So that, it shows a total disconnect between the money printing and the logic of any logical deployment of that money printing. They're just printing money like a reflexive action, like if you have a rat in a maze and you give it cocaine, the rat just starts to freak out, right? Yeah. So there's Steve Mnuchin and Jay Powell. They're two rats in a cage, and they keep printing this monetary cocaine, and they just go insane, and they're not acting in any rational way. Mm-hmm. And I don't expect them to behave in any rational way. Look, when you to extend that metaphor a little bit, if you give a rat the ability to give itself cocaine in the maze, it will do so until it kills itself, right? Mm-hmm. There's no ability for the rat to stop. That's where America is at right now. It has no ability to put the brakes on. You've got the money printing $6 trillion. You've got debt now over 100% GDP. Mm-hmm. You've got the interest on the debt now is over $1 trillion, I believe. It's like a huge line item on the American budget. So America's becoming a failed state. So coronavirus, it could have been anything. It doesn't, coronavirus just happened to be the thing that pushed a lot of the economy over the edge, but it was going over the edge anyway.
Yeah. Now, as a result of it going over the edge, there seems to have been a disconnect from reality from the financial markets. And so fundamentals, like the idea of investing now, seems to be distorted because all news is good news. 46 million unemployed, businesses closed, restaurants out of business, but yet the markets are still relatively strong and all that stuff. So what's going on there? What are they trying to accomplish with this?
Well, the stock market in America now looks like the stock market in Venezuela, in Zimbabwe, and Iran. Those stock markets are hitting new highs because their currencies are collapsing. The stock market in America is hitting highs because the dollar is collapsing. Underneath all the noise, underneath all the posturing, the U.S. dollar is, in its own way, you could say, is collapsing. And the flight into stocks makes sense from people who are being given all this free money, because particularly for banks who are buying back their own stock. If I'm a CEO of a bank and I have options on my own stock and the government gives me a few billion or a few $100 billion and I buy back my own stock, my options go up 10,000, 20,000% in a month. So, I'm going to take that deal every day. And to do it, I got to buy back my own stock. And that triggers algorithmic trading to keep buying stocks. And the computers, 80, 90% of the volume is all computer driven. And so they follow a kind of the lead of the CEOs that are buying back their own stock, mostly the bankers. And, stocks have never really been great arbiters of economic activity. There's usually a disconnect between Wall Street and Main Street. Mm-hmm. And usually when Main Street's doing well, it's because wages are going higher, and that's inflationary, and that's typically bad for stocks, and vice versa. So there's never really been a correlation that good economy equals good stock market, really. But in this situation, I call it neo-feudalism. So it's essentially the money printers are going to buy back the entire stock market. You know, the stock market's worth about $28 trillion. They've printed $6 trillion. So I would expect they're going to print another 25 trillion and just buy everything. They're going to buy the entire market, take an entire market private. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to have the cantillionaires, as I call them, at the top, or the cantillionaires at the top, and everyone else is going to be a peasant, right? We're going back to feudalism, feudal times.
Yeah. So what about hyperinflation? What about excessive inflation, the reserve status of the dollar? You know, would you say to hell with that? Like, you know, they're just going to, you know, just print till they can't print no more until something else. And do you see that something else coming, you know, relatively sooner now because of all the global contagion that we're experiencing from all central banks doing the same thing?
Right. Well, the dollar is already in a hyperinflationary collapse against Bitcoin, as are all fiat currencies. They're all in a hyperinflationary collapse against Bitcoin. In the U.S., what we'll see is definitely more inflation. If you adjust the inflation number for the way they calculated it, the inflation 20 or 30 years ago, before they did a number of these hedonic adjustments where they hide the inflation, because there's an incentive for the government to hide inflation as much as possible, because it stops the COLA adjustments, the cost of living adjustments, and pension fund payouts and this type of thing, that they don't have to adjust it to inflation, then they save money, they think. So they hide the real inflation. If you were to really calculate inflation the way you should, based on actual figures, we're already at 8 or 9% inflation in America. You know, certainly healthcare and education, they're 20-25% annual inflation rates right there. So it's already hyperinflation. And the only thing that's not inflating are things like electronics that are, you know, coming in from China. But it looks like China and America are now in a Cold War. So those prices are going to start going up. Agriculture prices are going up now. You know, we've had a long time where it was, you know, access to cheap food was still something in the U.S., but that's now being disrupted. So inflation is coming back, and the dollar is the last line in the sand would be whether or not the Fed goes negative interest rates on the world reserve currency. So that's the last battleground. You know, we can talk about that, what that means, what if it will happen, et cetera. But you know, they keep saying they're fighting deflation by printing money, but in fact, they're causing deflation by printing money. You've got now 20% of the listed companies in America have the interest payments on their debt greater than gross revenue, right? They are zombie companies, and that number is going up sharply. So you have zombie companies that are kept alive with money printing and corrupt CEOs that are buying back their own stock to create a concentration of wealth that we haven't seen in hundreds and hundreds of years, not since feudalism.
Interesting. So I want to touch on cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, of course. You got your HODL shirt on, and I mentioned before going live, you know, I've done some videos in the past called Confessions of a Crypto Skeptic or Bitcoin Skeptic. And so I want to get your thoughts on it as well. You know, we're streaming live, so if anybody have any thoughts or questions, feel free to ask us.
Come at me, bro. Come at me with your skepticism.
Sounds good. Now I want to get your thoughts on, you know, Bitcoin as it is today. Is it the same Bitcoin pre 2017 all-time highs as far as the idea of it being disruptive to the system? Because it seems like it's merging into Wall Street a little bit these days, with the idea the bankers are now okay with it, and governments appear to be still just, you know, not satisfied with it, but they're not really anti for the most part. Is it the same Bitcoin pre-2017 as it is now, in your opinion?
It's a lot stronger, and it's a lot more important, and it's a lot more has a lot more of the characteristics of an out of control Godzilla monster storming the globe and transforming the globe. The Bitcoin protocol attracts attack vectors. It likes to be attacked, and right now you've got banks trying to attack it and governments trying to attack it. And this only makes the computational per second number go up, the hash rate, as it's called. And of course, that increases security, and then that increases price. So the game theory that's baked into the Bitcoin protocol invites people to attack, and that makes it stronger, makes it more secure, and price goes up. So the hash rate's been going up now every 6 months, every year, uninterrupted for the entire life of Bitcoin. The price is the least important part of the Bitcoin protocol. That's the least important part really about it. People focus on the price and they don't see the forest for the trees. They don't see the protocol. They just look at one thing, number, price, and they make all kinds of wild kind of assessments based on price that, like a Peter Schiff, for example, who will just look at the price and then come up with all kinds of conclusions based on the price. But he is like he just is so far off base. I call him a pinata, a human pinata, because you can beat Peter Schiff with the Bitcoin stick all day long and the candy just keeps pouring out. He just says the stupidest things. It's so brilliant. It's like trolling Peter Schiff is my favorite hobby in lockdown. And he never fails to say something really stupid.
Yeah. Now, another thing is we've already entered into a surveillance state to where everything's ultimately digital. And so is there any concerns with Bitcoin? And so I'm not sure if you had a chance to watch the Monero document, and the gentleman who did that mentioned that Bitcoin has become a surveillance coin. It's it's something that you can't disrupt it. Why even fight it? Just allow people to adopt it and accept it, because digital currencies are in our future anyway. But yet there's now companies that do a great job of trying to track, trace, and taint Bitcoin. So where is it the same amount of freedom that you can have if you got physical gold in your possession or paper dollars that can't be outright traced and tracked, with hand-to-hand movement? So is Bitcoin a surveillance state coin in your opinion?
Right.
Could
So
it be one?
you mentioned a few things there.
Okay.
So let's try to unpack that point by point. So in terms of Bitcoin, you're characterizing it as a surveillance coin. So let's talk about this. So first of all, Bitcoin is unconfiscatable. It's once you are fluent in how to protect your private keys, it's unconfiscatable, which is not the case with gold, and it's certainly not the case with fiat money. So you have wealth for the first time in history that's unconfiscatable. This has never been available before to humans in history. So that's, I think, number one to keep in mind. Number two, other altcoins that are trying to compete with Bitcoin, and you mentioned one there. I mean, they will say stuff to try to promote their coin, to try to compete with Bitcoin, and it's usually easily shouted down and debunked. Right. So the idea that this is somehow a surveillance coin, as I said, first of all, it's unconfiscatable. So that's got one major attribute. But the second thing to keep in mind is that who's doing this surveillance? Well, the U.S. government or some government or some corporation, and all these institutions are run by fiat money, and fiat money is collapsing. So, Bitcoin is essentially a fifth column that lives inside the government and lives inside all these corporations. And within all these organizations are people hodling Bitcoin because they know that eventually they're going to have to flip sides and join Bitcoin anyway, because fiat money and the US dollar is worthless. They're not going to be continuing to get paid in fiat money. If you're a regulator, you're going to continue to get paid in fiat money and watch Bitcoin go to 100,000 or 400,000 a coin, and you're defending this collapsing fiat money? Of course not. So if you work at the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, all those people, look at these cops. The cops are walking off the job in Seattle and all over America. Cops are saying, we are walking off the job. We're going to see the same thing in the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, in the U.S. government. Senators, congressmen, they're going to walk off the job and say, we're tired of fiat money. I'm a Bitcoiner. I'm a hodler. That's the new reality. And that's just going to collapse under the weight of its own stupidity, and as it absolutely should. So I think I've addressed the concerns there. I don't think it's a meritorious argument at all. I don't think it holds much water, but that's my response.
Right. That sounds good. So I appreciate you sharing that. So what about the privacy aspect of it? And so all the on-ramps, for the most part, are done through institutions that I imagine all the exchanges here in the U.S. They're in bed with, the government, because you have to do the KYC, AMA, all those things right there. And so ultimately, once you exchange fiat for Bitcoin or any other coin, you're in the system. They know pretty much what you have. They know your addresses. They know all the details about who you are and how much you have. And so in the next couple of years, they can let that pass. But what about when the CBDCs come out? How do you think they will stand to the side, and how will they enforce CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, along with having competition in Bitcoin? Something has to give. What do you say about that?
Yeah, what's going to give is that central banks collapse, fiat money collapses, and Bitcoin becomes a unit of account. So, people will be exchanging in Bitcoin, and things will be priced in Bitcoin, and you won't be leaving the Bitcoin universe back to fiat. Once you're in, you're in. There's no going back. You're not going to be going Bitcoin to fiat money at some point ever again. So all the current on-ramps, you can secure Bitcoin, and once you do, it's unconfiscatable, and the balance of power shifts from those with Bitcoin will have the power. The saying used to be, he who has the gold makes the rules. It'll be he who has the Bitcoin makes the rules. So Bitcoin rich senators will be changing laws. In America, for $100,000, you can get a law written, right? And sometimes I wish America was more corrupt and it would cost more to buy a senator to write a law. Like in other countries, it costs like $500,000 to $1 million to get, politicians in other countries to write a law for you. In America, you can do it for $100,000. They're so cheap. They're like really cheap, down there in Washington, D.C. So the laws, you've got a lot of Bitcoin billionaires now. A lot of them are in D.C. and a lot of them are rewriting the laws, right? We're rewriting the laws. We own the government now. We own the hardest money ever, that's ever come up in the universe. And, join us or, get kicked off the boat, man. That's it. So, this is I agree that there's going to be a battle. It's going to be a struggle. But again, because of the game theory baked into the Bitcoin protocol, the more they attack it, the stronger it gets and the higher the price goes. So they've lost. They lost on January 3rd, 2009. All countries, all nation states lost. You can start to count the days until they're all gone. They're all going to go. None of them are going to survive. They're all toast.
Now, as of now, they're sticking around and they're going to fight to the finish. And so one of the problems with the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general just taking over and becoming the next standard of exchange amongst citizens as well as commerce and you name it, is taxation. And so if you can't beat it, just tax the hell out of them and make them fork up some of those profits that will be denominated in the short term in dollars or yen or whatever currency you might price it in until it's the standard. And so, how do you think that'll play out? Heavy taxation in the days ahead.
Yeah, well, as I said, once we infiltrate the government, as we are doing now, we won't have those laws in place, or we'll overturn those laws, right? I mean, tax laws, they are rewritten every 6 months. Tax laws. When I was working on Wall Street, I remember in 1986, Reagan rewrote the entire tax code in an afternoon. Yeah, right. Really. It's like tax laws, you can rewrite them in a day. They're not written in stone or anything. They're just whoever's got the money writes the tax laws. So right now, corporations write the tax law so they don't have to pay taxes, right? How many S&P 500 companies pay taxes? Very, very few. A lot of them get tax abatements and tax refunds, right? Yeah. They don't pay taxes because they wrote the tax law. So, okay, half the Congress is now Bitcoiners. They're like, okay, tell you what, Bitcoin is no longer taxable. How about that? Or here's a country over here. They're going to get into a hash war with America, and they just changed their tax law. It's no longer taxable. How about that? Oh, they just got $2 trillion injected into their economy, right? And the game theory is there. It's already toast. I mean, you're thinking about it like they still have a chance, which is, I guess, kind to think that these governments still have a chance. You don't want to see them obliterated in an afternoon. Like some kind of Hollywood movie or something. But the fact is they're done. They're toast.
Fair enough. So as always, we're speaking live with Max Keiser. So I've missed a lot of questions out there, but bring them in and I'll get them to you. And so precious metals. And so gold, silver, of course, silver right now from a lot of people is the most undervalued based upon the ratio and stuff like that. What's keeping metals down with all this printing and quantitative easing stuff going on? How come things aren't taking off right now? Bitcoin, gold, silver, you name it. Why not?
Well, first of all, I love gold and I love silver, and I own a lot of gold and I own a lot of silver. So I'm not one of these guys who, Bitcoiner that is anti-gold or silver. That's not the case. I'm very much a big believer in gold and silver. But look at the price of gold in every major currency in the world. It's breaking out to new highs all over the world. I mean, like in Argentina, it's up incredibly. In Russia, it's up in South Africa, against the yen, against the pound, against the euro. Gold's making new all-time highs because of all the money printing, right? That's the fact. If you did a blended exchange rate of all currencies, including the dollar, it would be making new highs. But if you just strip out the dollar and say, oh, it hasn't made a new high against the dollar yet, and by the way, it's knocking on that level right now, you can't draw too much of a conclusion from that. But okay, why doesn't it bust out to new high territory? Well, I think we know the answer is that gold has always been subjected to the gold repression schemes. They've tried to keep gold down, as they did in the 60s during the gold pool days in London, the London gold pool, which is, you can read up on that, the bullion banks and the global fiat money pushers, they don't like gold going too high against the dollar because it disrupts their monopoly, right? Yeah. But at some point, they're going to lose control. And then you see a gap. Gold goes from 1,700 to 3,700 an ounce in a day. It just gaps. It's going to gap higher. Silver, of course, is hugely undervalued. Similar situation. All those COMEX gold being delivered in the spot market is enormous. They don't have the gold in their vaults. They have to fly it in from overseas. That tells you something's completely messed up with this market, right? People are demanding, physical delivery. All it takes is one or two more physical delivery calls, and it's going to be like, no, we can't source the gold. Sorry, we have no gold. And then people are being, what do you mean you have no gold? I guess the price really should be 4,000, shouldn't it? Yeah, it should. Okay, boom, there it is at 4,000. And people are like, wow, I should have bought some. Well, yeah, you should have, but you're too late now. So then people will be scrambling into Bitcoin, like, oh man, well, Bitcoin's still under 50,000. I'll buy Bitcoin. Maybe because I was stupid. I didn't buy gold. I didn't buy silver before it went over $300 an ounce. I'm stupid. I better buy Bitcoin under $50,000 a coin, right? So you have a mad scramble. It's coming. It's already, you see it happening. This global insurrection against banker occupation all over the world, all over America, the social unrest, the people on the street demanding that they get a piece of the pie from these quintillionaire money printers. It's all happening. It's all very exciting.
All right. So John H. got a question here. So it says, why will BTC hold value when there are many other cryptos? Why is Bitcoin 9,300? What about Ether, Ripple, etc.? What is stopping everyone from shifting to another crypto?
Right. So all the other, again, if you have to look at the whole market and look at it in its entirety. So Bitcoin right now has 65% of the market cap, 85% of all the computational capability of the entire market is Bitcoin, and 90% of the volume. And those numbers are moving up sharply. And soon it'll be 99% across the board, 99% market penetration, 99% of the hash rate, and 99% of the volume. Because these other coins are not attracting energy the way Bitcoin does. They're not designed the way Bitcoin is. Think of it this way. Okay, a molecule of gold, right, has 79 electrons. Am I right?
Yeah. I guess so. I never went that deep into it, but go ahead. Yeah.
Right. It's number 79 on the periodic table.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Now, but it's used as gold, and it uses hard money and has for thousands of years. And number 78 and number 80, they're not used as hard money on the periodic table. Number 1 through 80, they're not used as hard money, right? Only gold. It's got 79 electrons on 79 in the periodic table. That's the only element. Okay. So people don't say, gosh, I wish I had helium based money. Oh gosh, I wish I had this money based on bauxite or whatever. No. Okay, it's gold. So what Bitcoin is it's the software equivalent of gold in that it's entirely unique. It attracts all the energy, all the hash rate. All those other coins are going to be starved of energy. The hard fork coins they're not even secure. They're garbage. Like Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Satoshi Vision are complete garbage. Ether is not even a crypto coin. It's a software project that is interesting, but it's not even in the same league as Bitcoin. And you go right down the list from there. Those are the top ones. After the first top 20, you're literally talking about garbage on the street that you're picking up off the ground and saying, oh, wow, this smells like Bitcoin. It's actually dog shit. But somehow I'm confusing it with Bitcoin because I'm on drugs, right? That's generally behind all these other coins are drug-addled, basement-dwelling psychopaths with absolutely nothing
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the DeFi movement of putting your coins to work for you and earning interest based upon institutions, lending them out and things of that nature? Is that the new future of finance, in your opinion?
Well, it's the old future of finance.
Hmm.
I mean, lending out assets for interest is nothing new.
Yeah.
So people are doing it with crypto, and okay, so what? That I can do that with your pet hamster. You can lend your pet hamster out for an interest rate if somebody's willing to borrow it and pay an interest on it, right? That's not a unique thing. It's been
Yeah.
going on for thousands of years. So
Yeah.
yeah, okay, crypto. Yeah, okay, I'll lend it out and I'll get but distributed finance is kind of humorous in that a lot of these projects, they have trouble with price discovery. So they have to come up with what they call a price oracle, which of course is a highly centralized mechanism to create the price discovery within the project, which is exactly what fiat money is right now with a central bank. So they've reinvented fiat money. Congratulations, right? Ether has reinvented fiat money. Congratulations, Ether. You've reinvented the dollar. Congratulations.
Now, another question here is something mentioned about the miners or whatnot and concentration, I think, in China. And so with China having, I guess, I'm not sure the details, over half the hash rate power because of how heavily concentrated it is in our region, what's the chance of China disrupting the future of Bitcoin if they have their own agenda for their own digital purposes or whatever?
Well, the concentration of mining right now, yeah, you have a large number of miners in China, and that geographical center of gravity has shifted for years. It used to be in Eastern Europe. You're going to see a lot of it now in the United States with Peter Thiel's new project in Texas. They're going to try to capture 25% of the global mining. So right now there is a concentration there, but again, game theory kicks in, and within that concentration, there is the incentive for anybody to disrupt the protocol in any way that would go against the arc of its progress from Genesis block to today. It doesn't make any. It wouldn't happen because it would be complete and utter crypto suicide. In other words, and the government they're holding fiat money, and they want to get into a digital game and a digital currency, but it's centralized, so it can't possibly compete with Bitcoin. I think what'll happen in China, it's a good question, and it's not a bad question. Obviously that kind of concentration is definitely something to look at. But I think right now, as the fiat money systems around the world are coming under attack, we're seeing a lot of interesting things happen. For example, in Iran now has 3% of Bitcoin hash rate. And Iran has figured out, I think, I don't know, I mean, just based on the kind of anecdotal evidence, it seems as though Iran has figured out that the way to get around the US dollar sanctions and the sanctioning and the censoring of the SWIFT system, which is the international system to move money around that the US controls, and the US dollar is used as a political instrument. The way to get around it is with Bitcoin. If in fact they really figure this out and they decide to put assets into hashing and they start to make a serious move, then you're going to see a hash war break out amongst various countries, because nobody wants Iran to be the richest country in the world, which it would be if it dedicated all their energy resources to mining Bitcoin. Iran would be richer than China, richer than America. So then America and China and these other countries are going to say, wait a minute, we've got to get into a hash war, like the Sputnik movement back in the 60s when America entered the space race, right? They said, hey, we don't want to give up space. We don't want to give up the moon to Russia. We better get in on this. So I think that's the more likely outcome. That's what I think is going to happen, and it's happening now, and I think that's the most likely outcome.
Hash war. Okay, so as we draw towards the end of our chat, got one more question that I want to get your take on the next, just hypothetical, what will the next 10 years look like politically, monetarily, as well as socially amongst, amongst ourselves, because work is changing, education is changing, the need to go to college, all that stuff is being tested right now. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on that. And so Bitcoin Black says, Max, is BTC the only crypto you hold? What other coins do you see going to the moon during the next bull run?
None.
Fair enough. So what about the all was it the tide rises all tides rises ships, or whatever they say? What is it? Tide, whatever. You know what I'm talking about.
A rising tide lifts all boats.
Correct. Yeah. So
well,
would that be
look, I mean, it's like, okay, on Wall Street we had a saying, picking up dimes in front of steamrollers.
Mm-hmm.
So what this means is that the risk of owning an altcoin against Bitcoin is too great versus just owning Bitcoin. But you might get a few extra, dollars, a few extra Bitcoin in yield, and you might make a few extra coins, relatively speaking, on a short-term basis. But the risk, it's not worth it, right? It's like picking up dimes in front of a steamroller. It's like, why would I go out in front of a steamroller to pick up a dime, right? It's the risk is, and the reward is not there. So there'll be people who are going to always stick their neck out. Like, look what's happening with people buying Hertz. It's a bankrupt company. They declared bankruptcy. And yet the Robinhood day traders added, billions of dollars of market cap to Hertz, even though it's bankrupt. And the company was going to float stock and said in the prospectus, anyone who buys this stock will lose everything. And they said it 5 times in the prospectus. And yet the stock went higher. Okay, so that's what I would say. People buying altcoins are like buying Hertz stock that's bankrupt. Or Chesapeake Energy. They declared bankruptcy, the stock went up. So I can't speak on people's, their gambling addictions, right? People are gambling addicts. They need to go to Gamblers Anonymous. I can't help them. They need to get help. They need professional help. I can't help them.
Understandable. All right. Well, so last question, Max. Next 10 years, 2020 has turned out to be a hell of a year. We're only halfway through it, almost. What are some possibilities that lies ahead of us? What are some things that's far left, right field that might have you concerned or excited?
I think that just watching the markets and watching what's happening in Bitcoin and the US dollar and the global currency markets. And I think that the grid, all the cooperative, the globalization that's been in place for 30 or 40 years, those trends of globalization really that started after World War II and really became more of a factor of the global economy every year since then, peaked really in 2016. Donald Trump became president and he said, I don't like globalists. America first, America's great. We're going to look after our own. We're not going to be globalists. And so that means that the global economy, which is completely at that moment, it would be very difficult to undo globalization at that point. And we see it during the COVID-19 crisis. When a pandemic hits, they have to shut down the entire economy because because of 40 years of globalization and just-in-time delivery and outsourcing manufacturing to China. And, having a convenience of outsourcing your tax liability to low tax regions and low tax countries, and they're all very globalized. And you get one of the big 4 accounting firms to run everything for you. And they can run this global panopticon of low wages, low taxes, free money from the Fed. And, that's been going on for decades. And then Trump came in and he's kind of a wrecking ball. And he said, wait a minute, we're going to just wreck everything. And that's pretty much what he's done. He's applied a wrecking ball to the global economy. And now we're seeing the impact of that. The global economy is wrecked. And in 2020, as leading into this election, it's going to continue to get wrecked. It's continuing to fall apart. People will coalesce around groups. You'll see more localism. You'll see towns kind of coming together and saying, okay, we are a town. And we, as a town, we will source our food. We'll try to grow some food. Our town, we're going to do some policing because we don't have a police force anymore. We're going to come up with a constitution for this town, which we think fits this town. So there's going to be a lot of splintering going on. It's going to be thousands of economic groups emerging all over the world. And that's going to take the place of globalization. It's going to take the place of the nation state. And nation states are run on fiat money, and fiat money is becoming worthless. So they won't be able to fund themselves. The people in power, in government, will just walk away. They'll get on a flight and head to Switzerland. We'll never hear from them again. And they will abandon us, like they did during the Katrina disaster, right? Where was the government during the Katrina disaster? There they were, people in the Superdome in New Orleans, completely and utterly abandoned, right? So we know what the government thinks of us. They don't think much of us. Once this thing really starts to crumble, they're going to just abandon us. They're going to get on the flight out of town, and we'll never hear from them again. So it'll just be we'll be on our own. So that's going to be both liberating but it's also going to be obviously very, very chaotic. But I see this as the next year happening.
Wow. Interesting. That's that's very interesting in of itself, because it's going to be concerning, because it's going to be a lot of chaos amongst that the new norm we're shifting into. So, Max Keiser, it's been great having you on RTD Q&A. And so, for all those that have tuned in, hopefully you got a chance to get some questions out there and get Max's take on where we're going, where we're heading. As always, it's good. Hopefully, have you on in the future, and we'll get a chance to assess where we at that point and go from there. But Max Keiser, thanks for joining us on RTD Q&A.
Yeah, my pleasure. Always available for you, my friend. This is my favorite show.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Have a good day, Max. Everybody be blessed, be safe. See you guys later.
Bye now.